Okay, welcome back. So we will continue our discussion on life cycle impact assessment. So we will look at how we choose the LCIA method. As I said earlier, there are different methods out there. The most common ones we are using right now is Impact 2002 plus and Recipe 2009, but there are other methods out there. So we'll look at choice of method, choice of impact categories. There are different impact categories which you've already seen. Like there was a list of impact categories, and based on where you are, it doesn't have to be that many times you may not be using all the impact categories. So there is that's where the judgment of us as a research scientist or research engineer comes in picture, because we have to kind of decide which impact categories is relevant for us and which impact category is not. So that's we make the choice. So there is a pre-established choice of impact categories. There are category indicators, characterization models and factors. So those are there in terms of LCIA method. So and then there are classification associated with characterization, like how do you calculation of the category indicator. Then indicator results, you take the impact score. Many times you take you do a summation. Say for example, if you want to do impact score for category J. So this is your Sj, which will be a summation of all the characterization factor which is there for the elementary flow for that particular impact category. So you have for elementary all characterization factor for elementary flow I for the impact category J. So you basically add them up, and then how the elementary flow is related to the functional unit. So for example, kg of I. So that's how. So in terms of the first factor, it will be kg CO2 equivalent per kg of I, and then your I is your elementary flow, and then the other portion is elementary flow related to the functional unit. So that's how much of the elementary flow is related to the functional unit. So multiply the two, add them up. That's your cumulative impact score for category J. So that's your this much kg CO2 equivalent. So that's how we do the calculation, and I'll show you one example right now where where we essentially do this calculation in calculation in the next particular table. Here again, going back to our example of that incandescent light bulb that we used, incandescent light bulb. So here we have carbon dioxide, fossil CO2, biogenic CO2. I will explain you biogenic CO2 after we go through this table. But there is the explanation is needed, but let's finish this table first and then we'll explain that. Then methane, fossil methane like CH4, sulfur dioxide, N2O, dinitrogen monoxide, it is also called nitrous oxide. Then you have sulfur hexafluoride, and this is not the complete list. The complete list could have more emissions coming out, but for these particular stuff, say if you look at the amount per functional unit, the kg per functional unit that comes out, these are the numbers associated with them. And as I said earlier, if you think about how much CO2 is being released, fossil versus N2O, N2O is much smaller. That's why you don't hear too much about N2O. So that was per functional unit. So if you want to calculate kg CO2 equivalent per kg, so we can do that calculation. This is the equivalent that we calculated earlier based on the IPCC manual. Remember 125, then we have 298, 22800. And then these two zero numbers also I'll explain you in a minute. So then you calculate the greenhouse potential. So you get the greenhouse potential as 19, because 19 times 1. So this is in the previous, if you look at from the previous slide, this is your, those are the two factors that is coming up from the previous slide, the summation. So here we are actually, these are the individual factors, and then we are summing it up. So that's the final greenhouse gas potential kg CO2 equivalent per functional unit. So 19 times 1, here since it's 0, we got 0. Then if you multiply this by 25, you got 1, that's 4%. And then you multiply these, you get 1.1. So actually if you see in terms of the impact, in this particular case, although methane is order of 10 higher than this, but since 298, so this is also order of more than 10 higher, so that's why we see more impact from N2O than from methane. So 5% impact. And sulfur hexafluoride, because it's of a very high equivalent, you get even 10%. So it's actually twice of nitrous oxide and more than twice of methane. So you add them up, you have a greenhouse gas potential of 23.2. So that's into how we calculate. That's what the previous slide was referring to when you do that summation of different components coming out. So this is what the software does it for you. So, but you need to understand, again I have been telling it again and again and again, you need to understand what's really going on within the software, so that if it gives you a wrong number, and you should be able to find out where could be the problem going on. Now look at some of these biogenic. We said that we'll explain it after we finish this table. What is biogenic? Biogenic CO2 is assumed as CO2 which is coming from the natural process. So coming from the plant-based stuff, from the biological stuff, the CO2 that it's not fossil CO2, it's not the CO2 coming from the gasoline and other fossil fuel related CO2, it is the biogenic CO2 coming from the plant sources. And since it is coming from the plant sources, since the plant takes CO2 to make the food and then they release CO2 as well, we don't take any impact associated with that. So that's why the conversion factor, and the second table that the third column that you see on this particular slide, you have 0 for them. We don't take any impact associated with biogenic CO2 in terms of its greenhouse gas potential. So that's why you see a 0, and then you multiply 0.6 by 0, it gives you a 0 number. Now for SO2 also we have taken it 0 because the sulfur dioxide does not have a greenhouse, it's not a greenhouse gas. So if sulfur dioxide is not a greenhouse gas, so that's why we don't include sulfur dioxide in the greenhouse gas calculation. So it's a SOx and NOx, NOx is, but SOx is not. They do relate to, it will, SO2 will show up as part of the acid rain. When we look at the acid rain impact, it will show up there. But in terms of the greenhouse gas impact, its impact is 0. That's why you see the 0 number for that, and then when you multiply, it comes out to be 0 there as well. Now sulfur hexafluoride has very high, in terms of the equivalency, it's very high. So even the concentration being so low, since the equivalency factor is so high, you get a bigger impact coming with that. So it's very similar to what we talked about. Remember we talked about that toxicity is actually exposure times the potency of the chemical multiplied by the exposure. Very similar concept here. It's not only, what is not important is what is the amount being released, it is also what is its potency in terms of the climate change or in terms of the greenhouse gas potential. So that's the greenhouse gas, although the greenhouse gas potential may be very high, but the emissions is very low, the impact may not be that much. And also at the same time, if the impact is, the conversion, the greenhouse gas potential is very low and you have a huge emissions coming out, and again in this case you will not see much impact coming out as well. So kind of in the middle you will see more. So that's kind of illustrate over here. You add them up and you get the greenhouse gas potential. So this is how the calculation is done. So whatever we have looked at in the previous slide, so this was the previous slide, this particular equation where you are looking at this is the characterization factor, and this is your characterization factor multiplied by the elementary flow required for the functional unit. So we did that over here, and this is we got those numbers here, multiplied them together, added them up, and we got this number. So this is how this calculation is done. Since most of it is done, if you have a software, most of this, if you have the characterization, the impact assessment part of it with that as well, it gets done within the software, and that's kind of many times the students don't really pay attention to it because what they get a ready-made answer, they don't really think what the software did for us. So that's an important concept, like how these impact assessments are calculated. Then after you have this impact assessment, this in terms of different emissions coming out, now you need to do some sort of normalization. So you do a normalized LCIA profile. What does that mean? So because you have we do a LCI profile related to a reference system. Now in any environment, it's not only the product which is having an so one particular product or process or a system is there, but it is a part of a bigger environment. So if say we live in a city or live in a town, we are focusing on transportation emissions, but transportation emission is one factor. In addition to that, there are other factors associated with that too, and sometimes we really forget that. I will do a very recent example of like when in Delhi with this because of the vehicular pollution, Delhi has a lot of Delhi has air pollution problem, and I totally agree with that. That the air pollution problem is there and we need to do something about it. but decisions such as banning like a diesel car overnight. Diesel car, yes, they do contribute to vehicular pollution, they do contribute to air pollution issues in Delhi, but we need to look at in terms of in the context of Delhi city, what are the other factors of air pollution coming out, and what is the real impact coming just from these diesel powered cars. Because if you ban these diesel powered cars overnight, first of all, I don't really understand why we allow these diesel driven cars first to be made and sold in India. Because I lived in overseas in different countries, three different, I have lived and worked in 4 countries, including one being India, 3 other countries. And for example, this Toyota, Honda, their SUVs, where we are allowing them in India to sell a diesel SUV, while in their own country of Japan, they are not able, there is no Toyota Innova diesel version in Japan, or there is no Honda Mobilio diesel version in Japan. How come they are being allowed and sold in India? Or for that example, Tavera, Bolero and all those different cars. So why do we first of all allow them? There should not be, if we are really worried about air pollution from these diesel vehicles, especially for the passenger cars. I can understand for public transport or for the trucks and all that, because we want diesel prices was cheaper, government was subsidizing diesel, and so that's why we want to keep our food prices low. That's we want to keep our transportation costs low for passengers traffic. I can understand having the diesel vehicle there. But diesel luxury cars, it's kind of why we need to have it. If our concern is the emissions coming out from these diesel vehicles, we should not allow these diesel vehicles to run on the road for the first time. But that's the only source of diesel emissions? If you look at in cities like Delhi and other places, there are lots of things are running on electrical gensets. Now the power situation has improved, but there are cities in India where big mall are running on electrical gensets. The AC in the mall is running on electrical gensets. So electrical gensets is a much more polluter than a diesel driven car most of the cases. So we need to kind of look things in more totality rather than just looking at on one, because sometimes it creates a lot of news that, oh, this vehicle is banned now, from tomorrow no diesel vehicle in Delhi which is 10 years old, or maybe now brand new diesel vehicles are not also sold in such and such city. It makes a good news item, but does it really impact on the ground? So we need to kind of look at those things, and this LCA kind of exercise helps us do that, because we have to look at things in more in totality to make a more judicious judgment, like a more judgment based on science, not based on emotions. So any policies or any like especially when you are trying to reduce environmental emissions or reduce air pollution, all these things should be based on science. Or whether you want to go for in the waste management system as well, which should work better. But many times we are too much into compost in the country, and sometimes this compost we are making the compost, we are not able to sell the compost because there is no market. We are making the compost quality is so bad that nobody is buying those compost, and the compost ends up in the dump. So that's not we are not doing any environmental good that way. So, but I'm not saying composting is bad. What I'm saying is we have to really look at things. If you want to do compost, your input to the compost plant needs to be really good to produce good quality compost. And but that we can discuss in a solid waste class. But coming back here, in a system, there are a lot of things going up there. In a city kind of system, it's so not only the vehicular pollution from the car that we started with, there could be pollution coming from these electrical gensets, there could be pollutions coming from fire, agricultural fire, which is again a big deal in Delhi context, especially during the winter months, and then there could be pollution coming from other sources too. So in that particular scenario, in that reference system, what is the pollution coming from this particular product or process or system that we are looking at for LCA exercise? That's what we are trying to do in terms of normalization. So kg of crude oil per functional unit, that's these different categories per functional unit, or their impact in terms of the emissions per functional unit, then you have, so we look at the other product system, we look at the reference product, we look at the geographic area for a specific year, for example Europe in say 2016 or 2008, whatever, and per capita average European emissions. So based on that, in terms of the reference system, what is the average emission from all the other factors which is like a documented and done together. We try to find out how they compare in terms of per functional unit of the different categories of impact as compared to the reference system. So is it more, is it less, and based on that we will try to extrapolate. So basically we divide it. So that's here you see a middle line, so that now you have your numerator is the impact coming from this particular LCIA profile related to the functional unit divided by the baseline, and that kind of gives you the reference system equivalent in terms of human health, ecosystem quality, climate change and resources. So that's kind of, then we are putting things in more in a big picture perspective. So that's how we normalize our data. We have normalized data based on all the other things happening around in the system. So that's how things are done. So you normalize this data. So again, if you look at the kind of in summary what we are doing, we had this elementary flow, we had the input and output coming out. From there we quantified this in terms of emissions coming out, different emissions coming out. From there we looked at the impact categories. From the impact categories we are kind of trying to do the normalization. So here we did the classification and characterization, then we are doing the normalization. From normalization we'll try to do some weighting, because weighting factors, and then ultimately we'll take it to the single score. So that's the whole how they interpret like a impact assessment is done. So we'll so this is how this impact assessment is carried out once you know the emissions coming off from there. So this is, again, we will look at some examples in future like videos as well, which will again kind of re-emphasize that. So these are these concepts are very basic concepts in terms of the life cycle assessment, the different steps of life cycle assessment. So in terms of kind of summarize again, same thing, we put it in a what we just explained in the previous slide, now put it in terms of text over here in boxes. So in terms of LCIA procedure, life cycle impact assessment procedure, there are certain mandatory elements which you need to have. You have to select the impact categories, category indicators and characterization model. So impact categories, as I said earlier, there is a list. You already saw those lists in terms of impact category. It was there in few previous slides. It's not over here. It was there in few previous slides where you had like a climate change, global warming, land use, acidification, eutrophication, all those different impact categories out there. Out of that, you need to select which one is relevant for your exercise, which one is relevant for your scenario. So that you have to select those impact categories. You look at the category indicators for those impact categories, what kind of category indicators you are going to choose, and then you use certain characterization model. We looked at some of those characterization model. Then you assign them as part of the LCI results, you classify them, you characterize them, you calculate category indicator results, which we did for the incandescent bulb just few slides back. Then based on that you come up with this LCIA profile. That's your category indicator result. So life cycle impact assessment profile you come up. That leads to your optional element in terms of normalization, weighting and aggregation. You come up, you do, those are the mandatory elements. So you can, in terms of the LCIA procedure, you go, these are the mandatory that you need to do, and then you look, many times you may see that some of the LCA results, LCA reports, they just leave at this particular stage. They will come up with category indicator results, give them LCIA profile, and then just go to interpretation directly. They will not go for normalization, weighting and aggregation. And some of the box at the bottom, this is optional. And many times for the research kind of activity, we look at this LCIA profile and then we kind of try to interpret from there as well. We don't go for normalization and weighting and aggregation. But if you are going for a policy kind of LCA study, if you are going to say, if you give this indicator results to general public, they will get totally confused what you are talking about. So, or even to, for that matter, like our bureaucrats who are not familiar with this kind of area, or like to the ministers, if you are doing a presentation to the ministers and other places, if you put all these scientific term over there, things will get confusing. So we need to kind of put it in a perspective of something similar to water quality index or air quality index or BSC index, like a stock exchange index, and so that people can easily compare which one is good, which one is bad. So for that, this normalization, weighting and aggregation, that really helps. And that, but here in terms of normalization, weighting and aggregation, things does go subjective sometimes. You need to be careful how you want to interpret those information. So there are different LCIA method out there which have been used. There are several LCIA method which has been used in the past, and here are some examples. So since we started with our LCA exercise, you saw that in 1984, where 1980s, if you remember that history of LCA slide, which we had in last week, in one of the modules of last week. So 1969 was when the Coca-Cola did its first LCA study, and then nothing happened for several years. And then 1984, when this was again the LCA as we know it today is started. So 1984, of course, since its LCA started in this exercise started, of course the impact assessment method also was developed, the first one developed in 1984. And this were some 1984, then 1992 CML that came up with another. So you don't have to remember all these different names, but it just kind of gives you a perspective, the historical perspective of how things have changed over time. Because as I said, for anything you do, knowing little bit of history and the background associated with that is always makes things interesting. You kind of feel you can relate to certain things in more in terms relate to them better as when they make further progress. So 1993, 1995, you see that every year in mid 90s onwards, there are a lot of activities in terms of LCA in the different method, LCIA method. There are a lot of newer methods also coming up. So 1995 the method came up, 1998 which was eco factors 97, improved upon to the method again, the different the names, and under in the bracket gives you the name of either the author of those impact assessment method reports or the papers or the organization which worked on it. So in terms of the popularity, so if you look at 1992, CML came with one, and then 2001 they came up with a newer one. So 2003 this Tracy came out, which is a US, it's a US based organization. So they came up with in 2003, and at the same time this Impact 2002 Plus came out. The Impact 2002 was much more became much more popular, and I would encourage you, if you don't want to, you cannot probably read each and every one of these, but this Impact 2002 Plus and this Recipe 2009, if you can get hold of these two impact assessment method, especially for those of you who are interested to do a kind of a master's project or a PhD research, even part of your PhD research on doing some LCA exercise associated with that, or if you want to become a professional LCA, like as a professional LCA professional, I would rather say that. So I would strongly encourage you to kind of get hold of this Impact 2002 Plus document and the Recipe 2009 document, which is maybe available in your library, or you can, I think this 2002 Plus paper I did find somewhere, it's either on ResearchGate or somewhere it was available as well. So you should download, and you should go through that method, and it helps you to kind of gives you an understanding of how this impact assessment, what is the logic behind all these impact assessment. And again, none of these impact assessment method is anything like a Bible, anything like it's not a set in stone. You can come up, like you can read some of these impact assessment, and then if you feel like that, no, this impact assessment method does not suit my requirement, my impact assessment, I need to do it a little bit differently, you can come up with your own impact assessment method as well. But initially I would say that to use some of these, and but then when you become more confident while doing LCA, you can always come up with your own impact assessment method. And that's one area of research as well. Some of you, if you want to do, say, if you want to do PhD in this particular area, one area where we can do really in terms of how to really interpret all this data, in terms of the impact assessment in Indian scenario. So I'm just trying to hire some of you as a PhD student as well, as part of like if you are really interested, if you have real interest in life cycle analysis concept, and we don't have, can we really look at how these impact assessment criteria should be done in a country like India? How, because that will be still, I don't think we have any study like that done over here. So that would be really a very good PhD research, maybe a couple of PhD research, where nice PhD thesis with several papers can come out of that good journal publication. So if you are so those are there are for that, of course, you need to read all this LCI method and try to understand the basics of how they are doing. Again, there are a lot of methods out there. I would encourage you to at least try to look at this Impact 2002 plus and 2009 recipe method. Those are the two methods which are most popular and used right now, and as we progress, of course, there will be much more methods. Say if much more methods which will come up, which will be in more like more elaborate, more comprehensive than the previous ones. So there are several methods which is available, which you can be able to download. Say as I said here, both actually recipe as well as Impact 2002 plus, you should be able to download from these websites. Again, these for all these slides that you are seeing in these videos, we will post the PDF version of that, and I will make sure that this hyperlink remains active on those PDF slides, or always you can copy this hyperlink to your web browsers and go there. So eco indicator, this is an impact EDIP. So this impact 2002 and recipe, those I have highlighted in red, and then others are also there. Then there is a summary of methods. So there was a summary of methods done in this ILCD handbook, which I showed you as part of that LCA history slide during the material of last week. So that also is you can that kind of gives you what all the methods that was developed until 2010, they have summarized it. It's like a review article. So it helps you to kind of choose which method will work best for you in terms of different LCI method. Again, these are, you can go to this individual, but at least since there are several of those, I will encourage you to at least go to the ones which is highlighted in red and try to read about those. And if you have any particular questions related to those impact assessment method, you can always post things on the discussion board, and I will be happy to answer those questions. And since not all of you will be interested in such a great detail, so I'm not going to cover this Impact 2002 plus and recipe in a great detail in this particular course, because we have only 8 weeks to cover this whole material. So, but if some of you who are really interested, of course you can join me for your master's or PhD and we can do a lot more things over there, but just what that was later on. But for now, you can of course put things on the discussion board, and we'll be happy to answer your question. So these are some of the and where in the world these have developed. So you see the method has been coming from pretty much everywhere in the world. So this impact assessment, but we don't have any method coming out from India. So again, if you are a energetic, hardworking, smart PhD candidate, do join, and we'll come up with your name and method for LCIA in maybe 3-4 years from now. So with that, this is in terms of the impact assessment. Then we will go in the next module. We'll try to look at the LCA interpretation and a little bit on ISO method. This is again we covered as part of the ISO method, but then I will show you some of the terminology which is used in ISO method, and then we'll have some good points of LCA, and that will wrap up this LCA methodology section that we have been doing for last several videos. We've been covering that. So these are very important concepts, very like a very basic concepts. And reason I'm spending so much time on these and going through these slides in such a slow pace is to help you understand. I'm repeating several things again and again to help you understand the concept, because as these are the newer concept. Many of you have not probably never took a LCA course or even a part of course like an overview of LCA. So for you it will be to understand that things are not that easy. Things do get complex. So that's why the reason is we are trying to go things step by step in a slow way, putting a lot of examples there, and hopefully you are understanding the concept, you are learning the material. Again, watch the video again and again if you need to, but I will strongly encourage you to learn this material. This is a new thing, and it will really help you in your job market. because most of the companies, if not today, in few years from now, will be looking for people who really understand this kind of subject, as because this is getting very popular in India as well. Okay, thank you, and I'll look forward to seeing you again in the next video.